Welcome everyone to Designing STEM Courses for Impact. Today we are lucky to have Dr. Amanda Haage from University of North Dakota here to offer their insight on the student retention. Dr. Haage is an assistant professor on the Educator Scholar track in the Department of Biomedical Sciences at the University of North Dakota School of Medicine and Health Sciences. As an educator scholar, she is committed to innovative evidence-based teaching as well as inclusive practices stemming from a deep belief that science is for everyone. In 2020, she launched UND's new Anatomy and Physiology course sequence, unique in its certification as Diversity of Human Experience, courses within UND's Essential Studies program. She has presented these courses at the various conferences, including the Human Anatomy and Physiology Society's annual conference, and as a keynote speaker for the C2 Summit for pedagogical advancements in the STEM. Let's welcome Dr.
So I started at UND in May 2019, and I was essentially brought in to redesign our anatomy and physiology offerings. We previously had offered a separate anatomy class, a separate physiology class, different levels, 200, 300. And the modern convention is a combined A and Phys that goes through organ system by organ system here. So they were separated. And importantly, those classes with the anatomy cadaver-based lab all had a 40% DFW rate, as is kind of normal. Like, how many of you guys teach STEM courses? I'm assuming there's a lot of everybody in here. That's our burden to bear there. So this is kind of the ask of me coming in at 2019. I was going to teach the anatomy course for an entire year with launching, hopefully in 2020, a brand new sequence of courses completely designed from scratch. Those courses are required by pre-nursing, pre-PT, pre-OT, med lab science, athletic training, and emphasized for our pre-med emphasis on campus. As you guys, if you're not aware, pre-med is a little bit weird where they don't usually require stuff that others do. It's emphasized for those. Though we had a 200 level anatomy and a 300 level phys, I want to bring it down to a 200 level. Again, that is kind of the standard going forward, and that there is just one of me, just me. This going into this, I replaced 2 faculty lines actually with this, bringing it all underneath one house with the availability of graduate student teaching assistants and undergraduate peer teachers. But the current enrollment in these courses was around 300 students a semester combined. And I'll talk about my enrollment has been up to 400 or more since. Okay, so that's what I was asked to do when I come in. And there's a couple more restraints or constraints that I want to add onto that when thinking about course design, because this is the process. You got to fit into everybody's plans. So part of going down to a 200 level for everything was particularly for nursing. So 50% of my students are pre-nursing students. And so to fit into their 4-year plans, because they have 4 semesters before they go on into 2 years of nursing. So in order to do that, I want them to have some basis. I want them to at least have a chemistry course before they come in, which means they have to start one, because there's a 2-semester sequence, in the spring. Everybody else's 4-year plans means they're starting in the fall. This means A&P 1 and 2 and A&P 1 and 2 labs have to be taught every single semester by me. So also with timing, right, we switched. Anatomy and Phys was a Tuesday, Thursday class, or anatomy was Tuesday, Thursday. Physiology was Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We had to fix section times and we had to change rooms. I was stuck originally in completely based lecture halls with fixed chairs that are bolted to the ground. Things with the course design that's changed over time. I'll talk about that in a little bit of a second, but with all of this kind of stuff, I essentially want to just say it's hard and you have to work with a whole lot of people across campus. So if I can depict anything and like designing courses, particularly so that they make an impact and so that they actually benefit students, have to talk to your people. I spent countless hours talking to advisors for figuring out that timing, figure out rooms, taking out the department chairs for every single department that like requires our courses, all that kind of stuff. Designing for impact means that you're not just yourself anymore and realizing that your courses affect everybody else every year's 4-year plans. The other prompt I will put onto this is that the constraint that I put upon myself is using the HAPS, which is Human Anatomy and Physiology Society National Standard Learning Outcomes. So HAPS is a national society, people that teach A&P at the college level. They've essentially come together and made a series of objectives of what they think covers a 200 level A&P course. So I designed the courses from scratch to meet those objectives so that I could also use their assessments to see if I was actually meeting their standards, which we'll talk about here in a second. So that's another constraint, again, I put upon myself in those designs, but it's something I would ask you to consider as I've been going through. How many of you guys are making the switch to Ultra? Have you guys done that yet at NDSU for it? Right? I just started this week, but like part of that process, and good on our instructional designers, they're asking everyone to revisit their objectives. It's a great moment to revisit your course design for those. Thinking about how those fit into what those courses should look like, particularly as we all face different expectations, accreditation, etc. Okay, so kind of setting this up with my design of my A&P courses, there's a specific ask of what I'm supposed to do. There are like physical, actual constraints of time, people, rooms, objectives, and then everything else is up to me and how I get to do it. So that's where I want to spend the bulk of today, is like what choices I made and exactly why I made those choices. To understand those choices, to start with, I want to kind of go through my teaching philosophy statements. So I have 7 statements that I decided back in fall 2020 that are on every single one of my syllabi that I hand to students. And what I've actually done for this presentation is rate them by spiciness level, which is really rated based on how much feedback I have gotten on them and how much, kickback, how hard these philosophies has been to hold in my course design and over time as students actually move through the courses, faculty see how they're run, etc. So you guys can all read, but I will just briefly go through these, right? Everyone can learn content. Science is for everyone. Real basic level, mild spice here. We're all educators. We all believe everyone can do this. We believe in education. Also that my students are adults. I teach adults. I started in a K-12 education biology major, and I specifically chose to teach adults as a future. It needed to happen, believe me. But even though my students are adults, they have things going on. Hold fast to the fact that they want to learn. That is their goal for this. Grades are not the only way to demonstrate competency. I'll talk about how this fits in a little bit later, but starting to get into grading, gamification, some of those pieces where we all know, like, what is an A? Any of you guys can answer that. That'd be great for me. But that's not exactly how we measure competency in the real world. And then kind of moving up into spiciness. So you'll see this one in my course objectives or my course design, but it's actually not the spiciest level. There's a second page to this. But science is not objective or neutral. It exists as part of our society and has contributed both positively and negatively to our culture. And science education cannot, say this again, cannot stand without a humanities education. We're all choosing to teach at a liberal arts college. So I'm also going to assume here that you all believe in a liberal arts education and what that does for our students. We're not just straight up doing STEM. And I will say, like, I always kind of bristle at the thought, like, yeah, we have STEM courses. We have a lot of content. One of the first things I can tell you that why this ends up as 2 chili peppers here is also the thought that not only can our science education not stand alone without humanities, it's not harder. It's not more important. And I think that's one of the first things you kind of have to rewire, particularly as a student who's gone through a science ed program. There's a lot of elitism that kind of culture forces on you. I remember having friends that are like communications majors and English majors, and you're like, well, you don't have to go to lab. What are you doing? What are you going to do with your life? Kind of things. Unwiring at this point and realizing all those other pieces are really, really important and just as valuable through things, which hopefully I can demonstrate to you here. Okay. But the spiciest parts of my teaching philosophy have been that, again, kind of going along, these kind of bridge together. More important than learning the detailed content is learning how to learn and learning how to think critically for a lifetime. There's a lot of detail to A&P, and all of that stuff is on the internet. And it is a fallacy that we don't think doctors and nurses and stuff are Googling stuff. They absolutely are. Talk to a doctor or nurse. There are stuff, they need to have a baseline of knowledge. They need how to figure things out. They need need to know how to adapt to COVID-19, new situations, different things. That stuff is more important than every single detail of this content. But spiciest of the spice. All teaching techniques used in my course are going to be evidence-based. Now, I am talking to the choir here, obviously, because you guys are all in this room for it. But I do want to give you some ways that I kind of frame that and why I say that one is the spiciest of my teaching philosophies. Okay. We're actually going to start with that thinking critically. So just some examples for like, those are the spiciest things. Those are the things I've gotten the most kind of kickback for things. And I want to talk about why I really, really believe them. So I'm going to do a quick activity here with 5 years of my life is going to go by fast. The ACU values. This is the 16 values of the American Association of Colleges and Universities. Value in a liberal arts education. Anybody want to volunteer what one they think is like the most important to their day-to-day life? Teamwork. Got some nods. Any others? What do you do every day?
Oral communication.
Great.
So,
Problem solving, lifelong learning. Do any of these say A and P knowledge?
no.
No. The detailed content is forming the basis of their profession, but this is like what we've all agreed they're going to actually do. This is what we do. We do these things. We're probably the most into our content, and we're still doing these stuff more on a basis. That liberal arts piece, that integrating their skills and educating in liberty in your courses is possible, and I would argue necessary. Okay, then in terms of thinking about evidence-based techniques here, so I like to frame this in the idea that like, you know, we all have higher education. I'm assuming a majority of this room has a PhD, if not a master's for things. And I really enjoy this illustrated guide. Oh no, the citation guide. It's Matt something. I have to remember his name. It's on the slides that you guys get for these. But he's gone through and illustrated like what it means to get a PhD. That you are building your content of knowledge. And you do that inside of what's already known in the universe. Right? That's what the black circle is. That's all the information that is known. And your single little PhD thesis that you're doing is pushing that little circle out just the tiniest bit. You're increasing the amount of knowledge that is already known in the universe with your PhD. But that circle, you're in the side of that circle. You're just pushing the circle out just a little bit. So we all do this because I went through and I have a PhD in molecular biology of the cell. I did a PhD in cancer cell metastasis. My, scholarship work is rooted in that field of things that we know. For some reason, this is what we do when we get to teaching. We have this entire body from the fields of education, the scholarship of learning, learning theory, overwhelming evidence about how we learn. And then we decide to exist in these little bubbles outside of the things that are known. And I'm not calling you all out personally, but it's a STEM commonality, I would say, of we learn this whole process of how we develop these PhDs, and then we ignore that process when we get to teaching, where we don't decide that that's an entire field that we need to build what we're doing off of. We think about how we were taught, and this is the class that I got. This is the way it is. Or saying that I don't know how would anyone know how to do this better? And you just kind of keep perpetuating the things that you're doing. So those are my two things, like examples I can give you for like why those two really spicy teaching philosophies exist. Want to have evidence-based techniques that actually work within the fields of everything everyone has always studied about education and learning theory, and knowing that my students are going to go on and do more than just need to name all the bones and the muscles and the organs and the insertions. I have to do something else. So I'm actually going to give you the outcomes before the detailed process here. So we launched in fall 2020. I launched online because of COVID. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about in-person versus online because I don't really have time, but they are the only STEM courses certified as diversity of human experience courses. I added another module that I wrote that adds on to the HAPS objectives that addresses social determinants of health. Race is a social construct. Gender is a social construct. Science and culture and medicine are all intertwined. Our culture defines whether we seek medical care, and also like learning how to learn and quantitative literacy with those. The courses overwhelmingly focus on active learning, retrieval practice, metacognition, application to real world, and flexibility. So I also teach this in terms of flexibility, 3 different modules, like 3 different ways. Again, I would like to point out, there's just me. 400 people. I teach in-person, team-based, active, flipped. I teach semester-based, synchronous, online, and I teach self-paced, enroll anytime online as well. So students have 3 different versions to be able to take this. It's part of that flexibility. It's part of my commitment to my students are adults, even if they want to learn. They need that kind of flexibility for things. I've had about 400 students a semester with various amounts of peer teachers, and graduate assistants. Okay. So Told you I was going to tell you outcomes first. It works. That's my answer for you guys. I want to tell you this first before you get into it. So again, the previous fail rate of the anatomy and phys courses was a 40% DFW rate. That's actually average. So this article is from the HAPS Educator, where they saw it's published across multiple different studies for A&P courses with a national average of a 40% fail rate. Mine is, I can do some quick math, 16%, right? And my students do extremely well. And I will tell you, if you're maybe looking at this, I look at this every single semester and I'm like, this course is too easy. I'm like terrified it's too easy. I talk to everybody I know about how it's too easy. And overwhelmingly, my student evaluations are, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. I promise you. That's all they say. You can Google me. Okay, so I said I made that commitment to using the HAPS objectives because they are nationally published, easy place to start. They also offer a multiple choice exam that covers what they think the content of their specific objectives. I'm not a big like high stakes exams prove a whole lot, but it's the tool that I have to say my class meets those standard objectives. So in 2022, the comprehensive HAPS exam average was about 47%. And then over 3 semesters, breakdown by grade in my class, you can see that we are meeting or at above that national average. Overall, my class is at a 48. So a couple points above the national average. Those HAPS scores do seem to correlate with the overall course point total. So I have a 1,000-point course, 900's A, 800's B, blah, 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 blah. So students who do better in the course do better on the HAPS exam. That's great. And also correlates to my exam averages as well. Students who do better on my exams do better on the HAPS exam by the end of the semester. Again, I want to acknowledge test anxiety, tests don't prove everything, etc., but it's the tool that I have. So we can do it. We can incorporate diversity of human experience. We can hold all those teaching philosophies and teach in best practices and make a course that actually teaches them A&P too. We can do both. That's what the impact I am trying to sell here is. Okay, so last little bit is then I want to talk about what that actually looks like now that you know that I've done it for things. So again, the point of moving to a 200 level A&P course that is combined is to move to an organ system base where you do anatomy and phys of each one and you progress through it. I like to call them badges because again, gamification, big Pokemon fan, you collect all of the organ system badges as you go here. So first semester is intro cells, tissue, skin, skeletal, muscle, nervous. Second semester is endocrine, lymph, cardiovascular, respiratory, digestive, urinary, and repro. You move through. In each badge, I've created what we call the badge cycle, where students go through, they preview the material, and then they gather information about each one of those organ systems, objectives, etc., outside of class. So I do flipped active learning. I have 135 recorded lectures. They watch the lectures and they answer questions before they come to class. In class, then we are working on identifying their gaps of the information, actively reviewing the material, which means that they are synthesizing something. They are writing something. It is something that is not just a select the correct answer aspect of that review. And then I have 3 major application types of assignments that I use that I will show you guys here. And then we assess. This is largely built off of, I have a book list at the end, teach students how to learn, and metacognition cycle that she applies to STEM courses. It's a little bit modified for an active learning because in that book, it's specifically written for lecture-based classes. So same kind of metacognitive principles of continuing to go through this cycle. Okay, so what do those questions actually look like? So previewing it, thinking about the material before you get into it, priming our brains. Somebody earlier this week at the ultra workshop that I was at called it brain warming, getting ready to learn for these. And a lot of these badges build upon themselves. There's stuff in skin that you need to know in skeletal, like calcium homeostasis. And so I think that's always this argument. If you get deep into the A&P HAPS listserv about like organ systems versus other ways to present the materials, that students lose that connection. So that's where I'm trying to build that connection is a lot of this previewing. So this is just a simple self-reflective question. My courses were previously built in Top Hat, which is why you see these. I'm actually moving to just Ultra going forward. But essentially, what did you know about the last one about calcium homeostasis that you remember? This is above the lectures before we get into it, that you can bring with you. Every single day, they are going through a preview before they watch the lectures. And then they are gathering that information. So the HAPS objectives are all by these letter and number codes. So F5, just slightly cut off there, growth, repair, and remodel of different bones. It's also what I name my lectures after. And if you notice in the actual questions, every single question in my course is also labeled by the objective. Transparency is super important. You want to be able to map what you're asking students to do to your assessments, to your objectives, all that good stuff. So we have the objective. We also have the type of question. I introduce my students to Bloom's taxonomy. I will tell you, I don't know how successful this is of them actually taking in what that means, besides the fact that she asks a lot of hard questions that I don't know the answer to. We prioritize application, higher order learning for those. But back to my lectures. My lectures are also presented with review questions, but my lectures I give them pictures. I give them pictures, and then my lectures are me filling in those pictures and drawing. So all 135 of those lectures, they get almost zero text in to start with, and they have to take notes. It is my #1 study tip I give to my students. You have to take notes. You should do them by hand. A lot of them do iPads, variable success rates for those kind of things. And then my students that go on to be peer teachers that are my top students have beautifully illustrated notebooks of A&P by hand, which I give them as an example for things. But this is all me going through and writing out lectures just based on objectives. None of my lectures have a specific length. Their average length is about 18 minutes per objective. They range from like 2 to like, this is your skin. This is the intro to skin. You have skin. Congratulations. To 40 minutes about urine information for those. Okay, so that's all they do before they come to class, and then they get into class. My in-class students are in teams, and I talk for about 2 minutes at the beginning of class, and then I'm like, go, be good, do your things, and I walk around for those. So for identifying their gaps in their information, I try to get them to really start thinking about that metacognitive process of what do you actually remember from doing the prep work? Again, a lot of talk back and forth with students, like realizing, oh, I actually need to do the prep work like the night before, not 10 minutes before, because I get to hear and I'm like, I don't remember anything for these. So it's a lot of quizzing each other in their teams. This question here is a specific, like rank these words of motion in the order that you feel comfortable with them. These are usually small, quick assignments similar to the preview, like what can you actually take with you from what you did outside of class? Here. Then the big bulk of my in-class time is split between active review and these application assignments here. So picture essays are a type of active review I do. Like I said, all of the, again, constraint I've given myself is the active review is something they actually have to write. It's not a multiple choice question. They have to make. So I do a lot of picture essays where they have to draw things out. I have little whiteboards as I roll them around the med school. A lot of people are like, you look like a K through 12 educator. I'm like, no, I look like I know what I'm doing, but okay. So drawing a lateral view of the school. So I do picture essays. I do crosswords. There's an app that I will plug that my students loved this semester where you can make your own connections game from New York Times and put in your own words. 100% recommend. They loved it. Concept maps, mnemonics, all that good stuff. Essentially teaching them the study skills that they need to take with them going forward. Reading is not studying, just like I tell them, me talking to you is not teaching. You have to start using the content and doing this. The difference between these active review assignments and then the applications that I'm going to show you here is really that these are kind of pulled outside of context. Crosswords are just like basic, like here's a 3-word clue that's like basic review of the content. I'd say they border more knowledge, recall, comprehension, where then my application assignments specifically focus on putting that into a real world context. I use 3 different ones, and this is where the incorporation of diversity of human experience comes in. Scientific profiles, case studies, and specific culture and med integrations here. Okay. Scientist profiles profile a specific person or team of scientists and how they have contributed to A&P. I always include a question about them as a person and their identities for it. So just kind of some basic, what did they bring as their human person, their background, some aspect of that. But then we go through, basic science review. It's just inside this kind of context, again, bringing the blooms up to more application analysis aspects of that. I have students that come to me with these kind of questions that are like, they straight up have never been asked to do application before. They're just like, I don't understand what this question is asking me. So I do a lot of that stuff in class, walking through small teams of like, okay, this is what it wants you to do, like interpreting that at the beginning of the semester, to the end. Case studies are essentially what they sound, real world medical situations. But again, that cognitive integration, every single case study that is like your basic of medicine also includes questions about social determinants of health. It is a cognitive, put them next to each other. They are of equal value through those case study assignments for these. And then lastly, the culture and med assignments. These are really into that diversity of human experience courses where I have questions that are purely that. So write a full sentence that uses identity first language, full sentence that uses person first language. I do mobility and disability when I do skeletal and muscle because they pair nicely together. But there are also still ways to incorporate the basic science in this. While sitting in a wheelchair, what is the status of essentially the knee joint? What motion is the knee joint in? It's actually, I think it takes a little bit of creativity, but you can incorporate the science into, again, those contexts. It's all about giving them application, getting them not a straight, what is this motion kind of question for it. Okay, and then we assess. They have exams at every single badge. I also, again, part of the reason this class is the hardest class in the world is that there are exams or quizzes every day. We know frequent low stakes testing does good things. You know more after doing an exam or assignment, particularly if we pull back the whole, this exam will determine your entire future part of it. They can know more. It's hard, and they definitely find it very difficult to prepare for that, but I also get thanked by students for that, of that structure, that going through everything. Everyone knows everything. I'm working on 3D printing for cell histology learning. That's it, because I wanted to end on this slide, which are my book recommendations. Again, we have to build on the foundation of things that are known. The ones in red I've found particularly helpful for designing these courses, but it's essential to know the field that you are working in, and part of your job is teaching now, which again, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I have to say it to other people who are not here all the time. So sorry it was fast, but I'm happy to discuss as well.
You have time for a few questions?
I have a question. Great job. I loved it. So the HAPS learning objectives list, in my opinion, is huge.
Yes, it is.
And there's been some recent criticism in the HAPS community that I'm sure we'll probably hear about next week. I'm wondering, do you streamline that list at all? Because I noticed a lot of low digit numbers on yours. Do you streamline this? Do you keep them out? What is your take on it?
I do. I definitely deleted some out, and I don't do special senses at all or anything. So like if you're deep into that, we can talk about it, but I do to a certain degree. And I also kind of use them as, I still give them to students as like, this might be what you're asked on the exam too. So like form a study guide based on going through all of these as well. So there is definitely some picking and choosing in there, as I certainly don't do all of them, and the very depth between them too is like how much muscle you teach, what bone markings you teach, and that kind of stuff is open-ended in there. And I think the HAPS exam at least assumes that you're teaching the most high amount of content, which is why their average is 50%. But yes.
How do you manage for your online course? You know, in your on campus, you have group discussions. So how do you do online?
People can say, I have not found a good way to do inter-student collaboration well online where there's equal participation without making it required. And if I make it required, then they just up kind of thing. So it is much more individual based in that regard. I know some of them form kind of study groups for those, but they still go through this process just kind of as a whole. So you go through and preview like the entire skeletal badge, and then you get all the lectures for the entire skeletal badge, and then you do 3 different application assignments. So it's a little bit more bulky than individual day by day pieces, but yeah, you definitely lose that collaboration piece, because my in-person semester based or my online semester based and my self-paced, because those are essentially the same class in my mind. So even if I wanted to make it more synchronous semester based, it'd be hard for me.